Let's take 3 questions from the audience. If you could state your name and where you're from, and also please make them questions and not statements. Keep them brief. Woman back there.
So, Jessie Scott from Euroelectric, since electricity prices have been raised as a subject. We're a business sector representing about 3% of European GDP, and we support the backload. We want structural measures to tighten the ETS in line with an ambitious 2030 target. So this is a business voice in favour, like with the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, like with many other business voices. I'm looking around the room at several of the companies, at several of the other sectors. Why do we do this? Well, we agree with the Commissioner that this is a long-term strategic issue. We want a strong ETS because we're worried about what else you get if you don't have a strong ETS. We think what we get is 27 forms of chaos. The fragmentation of the internal energy market, on which we've all worked very hard, 27 different versions of renewables national plans, hundreds of different renewable subsidy schemes, thousands of different tariffs. We think you then, of course, get 27 different carbon policies to go with them. If you don't have an ETS, it's not that you don't have carbon policy. You have a Dutch coal tax, you have a UK carbon price floor. You have one of my CEOs saying the ETS is moving so slowly it's a joke, maybe a German carbon tax. He's desperate. Not his plan A, it's his plan B, but he knows that this may be the way things go. The second strategic reason has been mentioned tonight and is equally important, China. We have finally got China moving in the right direction on climate through a carbon market. I'm getting phone calls almost weekly from Chinese companies watching the backload debate. They are acutely aware of this European debacle, and they want to see progress because they know that they are going for a carbon market. But I do think that Europe has to show its confidence in its carbon market for the Chinese to make the necessary commitments fast enough. On electricity prices and renewables investment, well, we
wrap
do
it up
think
fairly
this
quickly?
is the issue. 2011, plenty of renewables investments because of the subsidy schemes. Now, they are very expensive, about 5 cents per kilowatt hour on SME business bills, electricity bills, on residential electricity bills in Germany, compared to about 0.5 cents per kilowatt hour from the carbon price. You could triple the carbon price, deliver the same amount of carbon reductions at a third of the cost of the renewable subsidies. And there are similar numbers for other countries. It's the renewable subsidies that are proving expensive, and we're interested in the fate of all our customers, including not just the energy-intensive sectors, but also the small businesses and the residential who are bearing this burden at the moment. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I think actually the point you've just raised, want something I'd maybe bring it back to the international climate negotiations, but with China watching the ETS debate, what kind of effect does that have on international negotiations going forward? Let's take 2 more really quick questions right here.
More questions like that, please.
Question. You want a question? This is for the Commissioner. I come from Sarajevo. I work for a think tank that works in the Balkans. We support integration into the energy market, the European energy market, and the Energy Community Treaty is doing that with the Secretariat in Vienna. And there's many laudable things to say about that. However, Commissioner Oettinger came to Montenegro just before Christmas, Catholic Christmas, for those of you who come from the Balkans, you need to say that, and said that it was a great thing that they had developed this energy strategy for the Balkans without consultation of civil society, and it's going to ramp up the dirtiest of coal that we have in that region. It's similar to Polish coal, 5% energy efficiency stuff with huge amounts of water in it, and also a huge number of large hydro dams which are for export to Germany or Italy, with all these interconnects being planned. And we want to know where we fit in the Europe debate, because one commissioner is saying regional market, but in actual fact to help us solve 2020 in old Europe, and you can burn coal. And they're going to invest 44 billion in the next 8 years in the Balkans, and it's going to have a carbon lock-in that will mean we'll reach 2050 only being able to go nuclear. So where do the Commission stand, Commissioner versus Commissioner?
Great, thank you. Where did the block is head? And right back there by the pole.
Antoine Oxa from the fertilizer industry. Don't you think that one of the major flaws of ETS is the ex-post allocation system? Basically, allowances are based on 2010 production. So if you are in crisis, then you overflood the market, and if you have growth, it acts as a brake. Do you intend to fix it?
Great. Maybe, Commissioner, you could respond to that last question first.
Very briefly to that, I think in all these, the next round of discussions will be on the more structural options, and this can be part of that discussion, but it's also clear that the counter-argument to that, and I think that would be very much from industry, is we need to know what kind of playing field we have. And therefore, you will have to tell us in advance what can we count on. So I think that if we change that around, it would be tempting, but I think there would also be very big challenges in that, and there would, of course, also be very big challenges in that politically.
How does it fit with the current proposal to change the system?
No, it's part of, we have 6 options that we mentioned in...
Because you just said we want certainty, and now you suggest that the Commission should change every year or when need is.
It is a demagogical story to say that the Commission has proposed to change every year. We are not proposing to change anything every year. We are proposing, with the backloading that you're referring to, in a very extraordinary circumstance, with a very extraordinary crisis, to try to take care that the system that is, I think many here would agree, no matter what we think what should be done to fix it, but we would agree that it's the best system we could have, and it's preferable to the 27 different tax systems and whatever we heard about. And there is a reason why many of our competitors, they are now coming to the same conclusion. We want some kind of cap and trade system. That's what we are trying to do. So, gentlemen from Sarajevo, I will of course not go into sort of details about, I haven't heard the comments. I know that when we are talking about some of the pre-accession or accession countries, then one of the first chapters we can normally open is around these things. For instance, we've been doing that with Croatia, and that's also why we have been working with Croatia also in the context of the international climate negotiations. We're doing that with Turkey, we're doing that with many, in order to take care that we slowly but certainly will align the systems to one another.
Just one thing, the 8-year investment period that they're talking about doing this all
I understand that, but it's also clear that we have no competency to go to a country that is not part of the club yet and tell them how they're going to make their energy policies.
That's
clear. That's clear. But I just say that the more specific comments that Mr. Oettinger has done there in a very specific context, I'm sure you will understand. I'm not going to comment on that out of the blue.
No.
Just one thing, and that's not the third intervention, but and just 30 seconds, I'll be extremely brief, on the shale gas, to avoid any misunderstandings. There, the energy mix being a sovereign issue with each member state come into effect. The Commission has nothing sort of against, as a Commission against shale gas. There's not a climate big issue with that in the shorter term. There are some things in the longer term, that's clear. We are only taking care that those countries in Europe who want to develop shale gas, that then we will take care that the environmental issues about water and water contamination will be taken care of. Nobody in the European Commission or at the European level prevents anybody from going forward with shale gas. They can do that. So it's just to clarify that there's nobody from EU saying you cannot do that. Some member states will not do it, some will do it, and that is up to their individual judgment.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. Yep. Or back there.
Thank you. Mukund Bhagwat from Eurometo. I had one question, which is the Non-Ferrous Metals Association. I had one question regarding trade agreements. We have free trade agreements discussions going on, and what we call relaxing of trade defense instruments. So does it mean that we will be importing more products which are consumed in Europe while not producing those products in Europe because of these restrictions, which are certainly legally valid for European industry, but not necessarily valid, also not within the free trade agreement, as I understand. So maybe can the panel comment on it? Thank you.
And we have one up here.
Dave, thank you. Mark Johnston. Carolina, Poland. Does Poland accept that these decisions on ETS will be taken by qualified majority voting, and therefore that the vetoes which other delegations accepted over the last 2 years have no basis in the treaties? And secondly, Commissioner, I mean, just coming back to the title and Doha and the global deal and the big picture on climate, for the new global deal, what do you think at this stage should be its objective? Should it be the same objective as UNFCCC, which is to stabilize concentrations on the safe side of dangerous? And what level do you think that level is? And what prospect do you think the world has of achieving that? Thank you.
Start with Poland, if you have mics.
I'm taking good note of your comments on the Lisbon Treaty and on us being in agreement or in disagreement with that. I think that's a question that should be posed to the colleagues that have accepted Poland's doubts in several occasions, that I agree, on the 2050 perspective, be it in energy, be it in climate. I mean, we have made clear where we will be putting our 27 votes in the comitology process and in the co-legislation process when it comes to the clarification decision and the backloading regulation. So I think it is now time, and I also took good note of Commissioner appealing to those green member states that have not yet made their mind to stabilize their position and move on. I mean, here I think we are being very honest of where we come from and what is our perspective. And we're very ready for the discussions also on the EU level, which are coming for the post-2020 framework. But let's be clear, I mean, ETS system has been there and will remain there, and it is a significant pillar of our climate policy, I should have said it, but we, as Poland, see other instruments to reduce the CO2 emissions. Thank you.
Finally, Commissioner, if you could get your thoughts on the free trade aspect and then also the overall deal.
Yeah, I know it's time for very short comments. Just to say on the free trade agreements, I think it's fair to say that also my good colleague Karel de Gucht, the Trade Commissioner, is very much focused on now with sort of the discussions around whether there should be some with the US, with Japan, many of these new free trade agreements that are in the pipeline, to include much more than maybe has been the tradition. Environmental goods, energy aspects, climate aspects of free trade agreements. And I think that is how we need to move forward in the 21st century. That must be reflected in the free trade agreements of our century. To Mark Johnston, on the objective for the New Deal, is that just to stabilize? Well, that's not what I think. It's what the leaders have signed up to, first in Copenhagen and then confirmed by all the member states of the UN, basically in Mexico in 2010, that we should stay below the 2 degrees. And it's clear that time is running out if we want really to stay below the 2 degrees. And I have heard also the voices saying, oh, it's getting a bit difficult to stay below the 2 degrees. Maybe we could just change the target. Strangely enough, we are never talking like that when we are talking about economic targets. When we have economic targets, it's actually important to stick to them. You can bail out banks and you can bail out a lot of things. You can bail out even states, but you cannot bail out the climate. So it should be even more important to stick to our target, which was not taken out of the blue. And there I think the big issue for the UNFCCC negotiations, that will be also how to take account of all the good initiatives happening outside the UNFCCC process. Because when you want to mainstream climate into the core economic decisions and relevant policy areas, of course it cannot be only the UNFCCC dealing with this. But if we have access to sustainable energy for all, if we have more renewables, if we have more this, if we have more that, somehow it must come together there so that it can be accounted for. The big challenge in the negotiations will be, if all of us do bottom up what we will do, state by state, and then there still is a gap in order to stay below the 2 degrees. How to close that gap? That is the key question for the 2015 deal. All the other things are technology and methodology, but that is the core political issue. Yes, you will do that, China fine, US fine, Europe fine. Then we have a gap. How do we share that gap? Or was it just something nice to say when the leaders said we should stay below the 2 degree? That's going to be the key question, and that's going to be extremely challenging. And that's why I say thank you very much, Obama, for your speech yesterday. But now we also need the US to try to translate that into a stronger position internationally.
And if it's okay with the panelists, I do think we have time for one more question from the audience. Yep, back there.
Hello. Rob Ellsworth from Sandbag Climate Campaign. I have a question related to the gentleman from the chemical industry and all the Polish position. You talk a lot about the international negotiations and how we're waiting for the international negotiations before Europe can move. I don't attend UN negotiations, but I do get the impression that China's not waiting for Europe to move. They're moving pretty quickly. But Poland did mention that they really want to, progress in the international negotiations. And I wonder that you evidently both say you support the ETS as a mechanism, but you're not willing to support making sure it survives its structural form. So how will the dynamic of the international negotiations change should the ETS collapse in the meantime?
Mr. Garcia, do you want to start?
Yeah, just for the records, we have not been waiting for the international level playing field to happen. We would be stuck at this time. Just for the records as well, I mean, over the past 20 years, the production of chemicals in Europe grew up by 70%, and at the same time frame, the energy efficiency, so the intake on the energy point of view, just stayed stable, and actually the greenhouse gas emissions of the same industry in Europe just halved, so was reduced by 50%, 50. So we have not been waiting for the international level playing field to happen. However, going forward, and because of competitiveness, and because we believe in a CO2 price signal, which would be more global than only Europe-centric, for this to happen, we believe, and we will do the helping around that, we believe in the international level playing field. So we need the international, the other member states, and hopefully under your drive, Commissioner, yes, the US and China and all the others will join the club, the carbon club. I'm not so optimistic, to be frank, particularly as far as the US is concerned, because they already have accomplished their, not international commitment though, but their, goodwilling through the shale gas in reducing by 17, if my recollection is correct, 17% their greenhouse gas emissions from a baseline of, I think was 2005, if I'm correct. They already have, 1990, I'm sorry, they already accomplished that through through gas, shifting from coal to gas.
Ms. Ostrowski, would you also like to respond?
Yes, very briefly. We need a global deal, as I indicated or transmitted the message from Warsaw. We are very ready to work as COP19 presidency to make it happen in 2015, and this is how we feel EU is showing its leadership, its climate leadership. To be very honest, and Commissioner Hedegaard knows our position, and I think you do as well. The ETS is and will remain, I already said that, an important element of EU climate policy, but it will not solve our problems. We believe that it is a market-based instrument designed to reduce emissions in a cost-efficient manner, but not at a desired price. I mean, and that's Poland is ready to accept it. There is a conditional offer of 20%. We are very ready to discuss the post-2030 framework, as I said, but we have to know what will be the content of a global deal.
Okay.
Post-2020.
Post-2020.
Yeah. Now I'd like to invite David Hone up to give some summary remarks.
Right, thank you very much. I suspect, judging by the level of applause for the various speakers, no matter what I say, is going to be condemned by about half the room. But nevertheless, what I'd like to do is draw on some of the comments made to perhaps sum up where we might be at the end of this. I thought that the opening remarks, that's the very, very early opening remarks, provided a useful backdrop to this discussion. So the state of Rhine-Westphalia generates a significant proportion of German electricity with lignite coal as its energy source. And, you know, the comment was made that this state's grown in prosperity on the back of this energy system. It remains competitive as a result, but, and it's clear through its own policy initiatives, that it recognises the need to reduce CO2 emissions. And we heard, for instance, about the clear need to do this through, for instance, the World Bank report that came out recently. And this state set very challenging goals to do this. And whilst not everyone in the world sees exactly the situation in this regard, the state of Nord Rhine-Westphalia is really the world in a microcosm. We recognise this issue. We get it. We are setting we are setting challenging reduction goals. The 2 degrees C goal is very challenging. So the question is, how do you go about it? Not surprisingly, I think this region would want to find the lowest cost route forward. And it wants to do that to remain competitive. And we certainly heard a lot about competitiveness from the industrial companies here tonight. And it wants to continue exporting, but it also wants to reduce emissions. And if we go back to the sort of the 2001, 2002 when all this started, this is the reason the EU chose to implement a carbon price signal through the ETS, to seek the lowest cost abatement pathway. But we know what we've heard tonight, that this carbon price signal isn't delivering the lowest cost abatement pathway anymore. We can argue that we're meeting the target, but really this is not the right argument. The right argument is to have the price signal delivering the changes that we need. But the price signal's vanished. It's vanished partly as a result of the recession, but we also heard it's vanished as a result of overlapping policies. For example, and comment was made about the Renewables Directive, which may not be offering the lowest cost energy pathway forward. And we also heard that that directive is potentially raising the cost of energy for European companies and European consumers. We also heard a number of participants talk about the relative strength of the US economy because of shale gas. Now, the EU clearly isn't doing this, in part because the energy mix is being fixed by directive rather than fixed by the market. And I think that the real emphasis here is a return to the market. We need to focus on competitiveness and the energy mix and the need to reduce emissions. And the solution here is a robust carbon price delivered through a strong ETS, through the market. This does mean recalibrating the system. And the initial proposal to do this is to backload. As Euroelectric said, we need to do this to avoid fragmentation of energy policy. Because fragmentation of energy policy will lead to even higher energy prices. So the conclusion I arrive at from tonight and from this debate is that we should seek this robust ETS. We should endorse the backloading. We should want a stronger carbon price. But the objective here is not to raise energy prices. The objective here is to put the ETS back as the principal driver for the energy mix in Europe. And ultimately that leads to lower energy costs. And that's where I think everybody wants to be. Thank you very much. And thank you for
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank very much all of our panelists and also Shell tonight. I have 3 important announcements before you head out to the cocktails. That's one of the announcements, actually, is that there's cocktails outside. The next one is that inside your programs, there's a vote form. Please take part in that. It's a live poll. And you can see the results on commentvisions.com. And finally, there's also a feedback form. We ask you very kindly to please fill out your feedback forms. We really enjoy getting the feedback from the events. Thank you very much again, and enjoy the cocktails.